Hello and welcome to the 6th episode in our Crusader Kings 3 tutorial series, version 1.0.3. Today, we will be discussing culture, technology, and faiths. So first things first, let's get that cultural map mode open by clicking the button in the bottom left-hand corner. As indicated by this highlighted border right here, we are part of the Franconian group, which consists of these provinces right here. There is the Polish group, the Slavic group, the Czech group, and so on. Now, first thing you're going to notice is that there's these blue bars that highlight this area of our culture. The reason is the county itself is a Franconian culture, but the liege who owns the highest ranked title is French. That doesn't really matter so much in terms of actual popular opinion of the county, as most of these counties are actually owned by the proper cultures, but what it does mean is that if he wanted to, he could slowly convert those counties by assigning his courtier to doing it for him. So, for instance, if we wanted to go ahead and say promote our culture of Franconian in this task right here, it would go ahead and take him 8 years to convert this county from Saxon to our culture. Just as we can do that, the liege could do the same, but really it matters on a personal level. So, if we take a look here, this is a Dutch character who owns a Franconian culture land. What that means is it reduces the popular opinion by 5. Not a whole lot, but could potentially cause problems if you let it build up and a peasant revolt occurs over time. The reason it is only -5, however, is because even though he is the wrong culture, he is part of the Central Germanic culture group. If we go ahead and go to our culture, you're going to notice that we are part of the Central Germanic culture group as well, so the penalty is not as large. However, if, for instance, they are part of an entire different culture group, it's going to be a -10. This is part of this culture group, whereas Anglo-Saxon is part of the West Germanic culture group, and so confers larger penalties. Having an entire different culture group in your province can actually create a lot of problems for you. So it's going to be something that you want to make sure you convert if you conquer land that is not your culture group. The second thing when it comes to culture is that culture dictates technologies. Unlike in CTQ, where the technologies were decided by an individual county-by-county basis and could be investigated and discovered at your own free will, technologies in Crusader Kings 3 are determined by cultural advances. So if we discover a technology as a Franconian culture, everyone of that culture shares in the technology with us. In this case, moats is going to be discovered in about 58 years. The reason is it is currently the fascination. The average development of Franconian countries indicates a plus 0.12 per month, and the 5 base chance gets modified by this fascination here, resulting in a 34% chance to gain 0.42 progress per month. Once it gets to 100, it will be discovered. Barracks, on the other hand, only have a 5% chance to progress each month, and as a result will take almost 400 years to be discovered. If instead we thought we might want these tribal area military buildings rather than the moats, we can go ahead and change that because we are currently the cultural head. The cultural head is indicated by the character who controls the most counties of that particular culture and can sort of steer the cultural advances of that particular culture given our influence over it. So we can decide that our culture will sort of look into making barracks as an example, whereas the Czech culture is currently headed by Duke Neckland here, who has decided that they want to discover ledgers, which will take them 69 years. In addition to that, technologies are also affected by different relationships. So for instance, we currently have exposure because we share a religion with the Welsh. It'll essentially choose any technology which you have a shared religion with and pick one of those to get a blue border or purple border around it, as you can see here, which in turn increases the progress by 40%. So while our fascination only increases at a 29% chance, the Welsh exposure bonus is 40%, drastically increasing the cost. So as you can see here, with our fascination on it, it will take 26 years, but even without our fascination, it's still only going to take 43, so really not too bad. I encourage you to look through these technologies and sort of see what they do. I'm not going to go over all of them individually, but as one example, when we started the game in the combat episode, in episode number 5 as Greater Poland, I commented how we didn't have any troops which would counter pikemen. If we wanted to do that, let's say, and we continued to play that game, it might behoove us to change to researching quilted armor because they do not start with it in the Polish culture group, as you can see here. Now, that about covers cultures. As mentioned, you can convert them with your chancellor, and they provide negative modifiers if you own the wrong culture province, which is further amplified if you own a foreign culture group province. Next, we're going to go ahead and take a look at faith. So, if you click on the faith button, which is the middle of these map nodes here, it'll go ahead and open up the faith window. As you can see here, these are all Catholic, and you can see that same sort of division here. The county faith is Catholicism. However, the person who owns the land is a Muslim. As you can see here, we kick up and they are an organized Muslim faith. So that is the reason for these green bars, just like in the culture example with the Franconian ownership of our land. Okay, so what is your faith and what does it do? Faith in this game is an extreme impact because it determines what are sins, what are virtues, and what the tenets of the faith are. I'm not going to go over all these individually, but just to kind of point out an example, with these tenets and these doctrines, we end up with the 5 sins of lustful, gluttonous, deceitful, sadistic, and vengeful. Our virtues are chaste, temperate, honest, compassionate, and forgiving. If, however, we were to click on, let's say, this faith right here, you're going to notice that wrathful, craven, and arbitrary are sins, whereas calm, brave, and just are the virtues. We went over virtues and sins in our first episode. If you'd like to learn more about those, feel free to go back to that. In addition to that, you can simply read through all the different effects as mentioned. For instance, Orthodox characters are considered astray rather than hostile because of this particular doctrine. It makes it so bastardy, we can legalize them, we can do cousin marriages, things of that nature, and more importantly, it dictates what are considered crimes. For instance, a male who commits adultery is shunned by our religion. They get an opinion malice, but it doesn't qualify for righteous imprisonment. We can't just arrest our courtier or arrest our vassal for sleeping with someone else's wife. Instead, everyone just gets an opinion penalty with them. However, if we were playing as, say, the Slavic faith over here, you're going to notice that male adultery is criminal. So, if we had a vassal or courtier that slept with another woman, we could actually arrest them without being considered a tyrant in this faith. So, it's important to pay attention to what is considered a criminal offense in your particular culture. For instance, kinslaying in Muslims is accepted. In fact, they're not even seen as kinslayers, so you don't get this trait at all. Something to consider and pay attention to. You have to know what your virtues are, you have to know what your sins are, and you have to know with what you can get away with. I wouldn't recommend killing your brother because that will end very badly for you if you happen to be a Catholic. In addition to that, it shows your current head of faith and your clergy doctrines, and provides any specific specialties. For instance, non-Christian faiths with Christian citizenship tenet are considered hostile instead of evil. If one of these pagan religions picks up Christian syncretism, then we can actually sort of still interact with them. Intermarriage can still happen, but we really don't like each other. Then, this allows you to see your faith head as well as create a new religion outright. To do so, you simply click the bottom right there, and it'll let you select whatever you'd like to do. The farther away you deviate from something, the more it'll cost. So we start with armed pilgrimages, but if we wanted, let's say, carnal exaltation, which makes lustful a virtue and chaste a sin, that would cost us 751 piety, bringing up the cost of this religion to 4,050. You can mix match these any which way you'd like, and sort of change your tenets and doctrines to whatever you want. It's actually pretty cool. The only disadvantage is it costs an astronomical amount of piety. which means you're not going to be doing it any time, and you can only do it once per faith, although honestly, you would probably never generate enough piety to do it more than once anyway. You can name it whatever you like. In this case, I just filled it out with A's so that I could show it off as an example. You don't actually need any holy sites if you want to do it. However, if you want your new religion to have your new Christian faith rather, to have a head of state or a head of culture, you're going to want to make sure you actually have a holy site. So, if we possessed this holy site, for instance, when we made the new faith, we'd actually get our own little pope or patriarch, whatever our doctrine indicated. So that's kind of cool. In the case of pagans, they actually need 3 different holy sites to reform. So they would need to possess at least 3 of these 5 holy sites, you can see here, in order to reform the religion from unreformed to reformed. In addition to all of the faith requirements, but they can do the same thing that we did and mix and match all of these fun stuff. It's quite intensive. It's really interesting. If you want to convert your faith, all you got to do is click next to it and go ahead and see this button right here. For instance, if we wanted to convert to Muslim, it would cost us a whopping 18,000 piety. The reason is the undiscounted doctrine cost, essentially the difference between our doctrines and their doctrines, the difference in fervor. Our learning reduces it by 1% per learning. The converting to an existing faith makes it slightly cheaper, but converting to an outright different religion increases this by 100%. If instead we were converting from an unreformed religion to a reformed one, it would get a substantially cheaper discount. It wouldn't be nearly as expensive. So if you want to change faiths or create faiths, that is how you do it. More or less, that wraps up the faith and cultural section of this tutorial, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.